Hashem Shuki and others will come on soon. Okay, so we're starting the Mishnah on page Pei Hey Amid Beis, Hamaka Avi V'Imoy. We're kind of going fast through this parak because we're trying to get to Chelek, which is the next parak 11, parakas 11. Okay, so we're in the middle of learning about those people who get killed by the Bezdin by chenek, by choking. So the Mishnah, we said already in the first Mishnah, one of them is someone who hits or curses his parents, or her parents for that matter. So the Mishnah continues, it's probably a seif of the original Mishnah. Hamaka avi v'imai, if someone is to hit his father or her mother, you're not considered chayiv until you make a wound. Now again, we learned last week about the halachas of treatment of your parents, because there's sometimes you're going to draw blood and it's not going to be out of out of hate or upsetness. It's just if you're a doctor and all. So, but nevertheless, there's those who are Rav. We learned Ma'aseh Rav. The Rav was careful, but here we're talking about someone who hits for the sake of hitting. So you're not chayiv misa until you make a chabur, until you make a wound. So, and he says, and the Mishnah continues, and this is where things are more stringent in someone who curses his parents than someone who hits his parents. Shamakala, because someone, hey Bruce, we're starting the Mishnah on page 55-2, I believe it's page 1. Okay, we're talking about a person who strikes his parents, so it's not considered chayiv misa. You don't get put to death unless it is a situation where you make a wound, proper wound. So, which is again, you have to remember, you have to be very careful because this is an important point, because a person, you could touch your parents, you could give your father a high five, and that could be considered a makav v'imoy. So therefore the Mishnah has to be very careful to describe what is it. It has to be a wound, not just touching your parents. Okay, so so then he says this is a chomer. This is more stringent of a mekalel, someone who curses one's parents, maybe a maka, someone who hits a parent. If one is to curse their parents after their passing, and you do it in a way that's considered cursing, so then it is you also chayiv misa. You also get put to death, even if your parents have already passed away. However, if someone who hits someone after their parents have passed away, you strike your parents, then you're not chayiv misa. Now, what is the connection between the two? Why does he say? Why is it a follow-up? It means the Mishnah starts a statement and says, that someone who strikes one's parents, you're not chayiv until you make a wound. And then it says, this is what makes it more stringent, because like Rashi, we learned Rashi before the Mishnah, when it says that it's also a technicality. You can't technically make a wound to your parents if they've already passed away. So if in the last week's Mishnah we learned that we found this situation where someone else, meaning a non-child, strikes a person that's certainly going to die, a person who's walking towards the death sentence. So there, and it's just a person, right? So there they say that although you're not supposed to hit someone, it's still, even if they did tshuva, but nevertheless, it's not, the person's about to die. However, a parent, if you hit your parent, even if they're about to die, but if they're walking towards the death, they're still alive, and you can make a wound. Whereas once they die, once they pass away, there's just technically you can't. Like Rashi says on the top of the page before the Mishnah, he says the nefesh. There's no life in the body. The nafkaleliyah, we learned the benefesh v'yetzer laharig. So it has to be a person that's alive, and because the person is not alive, so that's a technicality. But to curse your father's or your parents' name or their existence even after they pass away, that's something that's possible. Okay, that's why he connects zechomer mibakal mibamaka. Okay, the Gemara now. The Gemara is really going to go on to going from here. So the Gemara says like this: that Taner Rabbanan, our rabbis have learned. Shukei was just starting the Gemara after the Mishnah on page Pei Hey Amid Beis. Taner Rabbanan, the Gemara learned like this. Avi v'imai, we learned in the Mishnah. Avi v'imai kilel. There's a pasuk. The pasuk says there's a few pasukim that says about the prohibition of cursing your parents. So in Dvarim, it says like this: Ki ish Ish ashayikalis aviv vesima, a person. We're going to learn soon why say ish that curses one's father or mother. Ma'isumas gets put to death. Okay, so seemingly the pasuk should stop here. But the pasuk continues, Avivima killed dam of boy, because he cursed his parents, dam of boy, his blood is his. And we learned before the pun, what does it mean, dam of boy? Okay. That so he says, Tanraban Avivima kilo. So the pasuk finishes off, for he cursed his father and mother. So la'achamisa is Tanraban Avivima kilo la'achamisa shiachal hoyel, a person we would have thought hoyel v'chayv v'maka v'chayv mekal, that just like a person has two laws connected to their parents. One is if you strike your parents, one is if you curse your parents. So one would have thought that just like a person who strikes one's parents, the only time the prohibition is put to death. Obviously, you're not allowed to hurt your father's. You're not allowed to embarrass your father's body even after the death. We know from the story of Chizkiyahu and his father. I think it was at Amos, that his father was that he took his father and dragged his body through the streets of Yerushalayim as an atonement, and the rabbis were not happy with that. So he says, so one would have thought, I would have thought, just like when I strike someone, I'm not put to death unless the parents are alive. Afmakal, so too, the prohibition of cursing a parent is only as long as the parents are alive. There's a kavachimer. Just like when we strike a parent, no matter what we learned before, it's machlekes, but according to this Mishnah, we've learned that even if your parents are shloi ba'amcha, what's ba'amcha mean? Because the pasuk that one of the pasukim that talks about cursing, it says v'nasi ba'amcha leisaur, a prince from amongst your people. Amcha means from amongst your people, don't curse. So from there, the Gemara learns, but the only person who does ma'isa amcha, a person who behaves like a person of the community. However, if a person doesn't behave like someone of the community, so the prohibition of cursing another person is not there. So the Gemara says the kavachimer, ma'amaka, just like striking someone. That nevertheless, even if your father behaves like a person who's not amcha, nevertheless, we consider him like amcha. We consider him like a person of the community. Means it doesn't make a difference of his behavior. Nevertheless, if you strike him after his death, then you're not chay misa. But when you curse someone, it's dependent if the person behaves. If the person doesn't behave properly, so he's not considered a member of the community. So you see, again, there's two reasons to believe why striking someone is more lenient than hitting someone, than cursing someone. The first one is that he says, nevertheless, he says, and he didn't so then I shouldn't be obligated to if I curse someone after his death, if I curse my parents after the death. The pasuk says, the fact that the verse continues and says that says that there's an extra part of the verse aviv imay kilel. So the extra words of the pasuk, although it seems repetitive and not necessary, is coming to teach us that even though one would think that cursing is less strict than striking, but the extra words in the pasuk come to teach us it's not like that. Okay. So the Gemara continues. The ma'aser like kra aviv imay, that from the extra, he will see in a second that from the extra words of Imai, so we have extra words. What's this talking about? The Tanya we learned. Ish. Okay, so now we have a machlekes now of Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshua. We're going to see what the argument is. But based on what did we say before? We quoted the Kal V'chomer to teach us that the extra words of Aviv Imei Kilul come to teach us that even if you curse a parent after their life, after they passed away, you're still responsible. You still get put to death. What is this argument about? So again, we have the verse says interesting language. It says ish, a person. It just said a person who curses his parents. So we're going to see that basically one of the opinions is that ish comes to teach us that the Torah is talking like in an extreme situation where a person, it's so extreme to curse or to strike one's parents. So we use the double language ish. But now we're going to analyze the pasuk. The pasuk says ish, ma tamad leimer ish. Why does it have to say ish? So the Gemara continues. The rabbis, this comes to teach us that there doesn't only mean a male, but it includes all types of children, bas tumtum madringas. Whether a person is a daughter or a person, hold on a second, this person's going to continue to text me until I turn it off. Okay. So this says that so what's coming is ishish. It comes to include a daughter. That a daughter is not allowed to curse her parents, or a tumtum, a person who has no sexual organs, means they're covered up, or androgynous, who has both sexual organs. So nevertheless, even though halachically the tumtum and androgynous, there's suffix, there's a doubt if they're men or female or male, and therefore in certain situations they're considered, they go with the leniencies of the woman or the stringencies of the male. But in this case, so therefore one would think it's only talking about an actual male. So the pasuk says ish ish 2 times ish to teach us that it includes any kind of child. Asher yikalas avivima, that would curse one's parents. So the Gemara says, "Enli aviv imay aviv shlei imay imay shlei aviv minayin." So the pasuk, if I just read the pasuk, I would think that in order to be considered obligated from cursing one's parents is only if you curse both your parents. And there's a svara to that concept. It means cursing both your parents. We've had this Gemara before, where you curse both your parents. It means if you curse your parents as parents, not as an individual, meaning I like my mother, I don't like my father. I get along with my father, I don't get along with my mother, and you use extreme language about that. So one would think that only if you curse both your parents. However, if you curse only one of your parents, the father without the mother, or the mother without the father, maybe that's not a prohibition, or not considered punishable by death, at least. Only aviv imay, if they're together. Aviv shalai imay, a father, if you curse your father, not including your mother, or you curse your mother, God forbid, and shalai aviv, not including your father, minayin. So therefore the pasuk continues, aviv ve'imay kilel. You've cursed either your father or your mother. It means the pasuk comes, I'm not perfect in grammar, but the pasuk seems to take as many scenarios as possible by using the words ish ish to include all kind of children, but to using 2 times aviv imay kilel to include whether it's the parents are separately or together. So this has nothing to do to teach us that it's after death, right? So this, according to this verse, the pasuk is all needed for the laws of cursing your parents while they're alive. So therefore, Tamalaymer aviv imay kilel, aviv kilel imay kilel. Whether you curse your father, whether you curse your mother, it's not important if it's both of them. Either one of them alone, even, is a prohibition punishable by death. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says no. Mashma shneim ke'echad. The mashma echad ve'echad b'fnei atzmai. Achi partachai kasev yachtav. So therefore not. Meaning to say that Rabbi Yoshia says we don't need the extra pasuk for that. Why? Because Rabbi Yoshia says that it doesn't say anywhere that that they have to be together. It just says your father and your mother. It could mean together, it could be separate. So we have already a limud in other cases. That when the Torah is coming to try to eliminate the thought of that you need them to be that you need them to be together, is when the Torah says yachtav. Where do we have the idea of yachtav? It says by shor and chamar b'dishay, right? It says that you're not allowed to take an ox and a donkey and use them to plow together. So the pasuk says, like it says, I'll read the Rashi. The Rashi says, "Ach yiftchay kasav yachad." So yachtav, it says, just like when it comes to plowing by an ox and a donkey, the pasuk is very clear. That says you shouldn't do it yachtav. Shema Amina. From there we see the Eloi Hava Yachtav. Had the verse not said the word Yachtav, Hava Mashma Shar Levadi v'Chamar Levadi. Even though it takes the whole content of the pasuk totally different, right? If when you say don't curse your parents, so obviously the idea of cursing your parents is a bad thing. The only thing is, one may think that you're not allowed to curse them as a team. It means as a full unit, you have 2 parents. You can't curse them, means you're cursing your whole concept of parenthood. Where if you curse them as individuals, it's kind of, you're not cursing the fact that they're your parents. You're cursing, you don't like your mother personally. You don't get along with her. You don't get along with your father personally. But it's not that you don't get along with the fact that you have parents. So the Torah is coming to say that you may think that curse is about the team of 2 people, a man and a woman who made you, who brought you to this world. So you have an issue with them as parents, whereas as a mother could be a private problem you have. You don't get along. But here by ox and a donkey, if the Rashi says that had the word not said yachtav, it's a whole nother law. It's nothing connected. I mean, why? I mean, basically, what we would understand is that a person's not allowed to ever plow the field with an ox or ever plow the field with a donkey. Nothing to do with a donkey and an ox together. Whatever the reason Torah would mean, that a donkey, you can never use an ox to plow your field, which is a whole nother kind of halacha. And whatever the thinking of that halacha would be, has nothing to do with the actual halacha. The actual halacha is the halacha of klayim, of mixing two species together. It has nothing to do with the plowing. It has to do with the fact that you can't use two species together. But nevertheless, we need the word yachtav to teach us that. Had the pasuk not said yachtav, then we would have thought that the Torah is coming to teach us. You're not allowed to ever use an ox or a chamor to plow for whatever reason. So even surely over here, where there's no reason to believe that you need to have only both parents, that you have to have both parents together to curse them together as a team, and it doesn't, and nevertheless it doesn't say yachtav. So then then obviously it means even if they're separate. Okay, that's like a kal v'chomer kind of limud. So Rashi again, Rashi says, "K'mei shefart b'choresh b'shor v'chamor midefart l'choshma mina d'ilai havi yachtav." It didn't say yachtav. Have a mashma. One could have thought shor levada. You're never allowed to use an ox to plow. V'chamor levada, and you're never allowed to use a donkey to plow. And because it doesn't say yachtav, we are able to understand it to mean like that it's either your father or your mother, because it doesn't say yachtav. So if the pasuk doesn't say yachtav, so automatically we come to understand that it means that you're not allowed to curse your parents either separately or together. So that means that Rabbi Yonasan does not need the verse Aviv Imay Kilo to teach us together. So now the question is, but according back to our original question, so therefore our Gemara could go easy according to Rabbi Yonasan. So why does the pasuk say Aviv Imay Kilo? To teach us another law. And that is that after their death, you're not allowed to curse them. However, we have a question to Rabbi Yishir Minalai. How does Rabbi Yishir know that one is not allowed to curse one's parents after the death? Because he needs all the parts of the verse to teach us the laws of while they're alive. So, Minalai. So, Naftle mi vekal aviv imay maisumas. So we have it from another verse. It says in the verse in Mishpatim 21:17 that Mekal Avima Yumais, which is another extra pasuk talking about it. Again, we have a few verses talking about it. So what do we need it? What do we need that for? That's coming to teach us after death. So that's the case. Why does it say this extra verse if everything by him is included in the initial verse? So the Gemara answers, he needs it to teach us that a daughter and a tumtum and androgynous, again, children that are born with either no or both sexual organs, are also prohibited from cursing one's parents. So the Gemara says, why do we need that extra verse? Let's learn it from the extra words, ish, man. I should have just said man or a person. So what's it? Why? Like Yesha uses it. Yesha uses ish to teach us that. So the Gemara says, that it's not. It doesn't. The word ish is not significant. Doesn't have any great meaning to it. It's just the way people talk. Okay. So if it's the way people talk, so that's so there's no limud for it, and therefore we need the second verse to teach us a timtun and dragons. Okay. So the Gemara now is like this. It says in our Mishnah, we learned it says zeh chomer. This is where it is more stringent of the laws of cursing than the laws of hitting. Why? Because the laws of cursing, we said, is even after death, where the laws of hitting is not after death, is only as long as the parents are alive. So the Gemara says, "V'lisnei chomer b'maka min b'makal shamaka oised b'ishlei b'amcha kamcha masha enkein b'makal." So the Gemara says, if we're already talking about the different things that are more stringent by cursing, because even after death, whereas hitting after death is not a prohibition. Again, it's not a prohibition for technicality, meaning to say that where does this technicality not come into play? When an irregular person wouldn't be responsible for hitting someone because he's mamish being taken to their death. I don't know, Bruce, you would know if there's any law like that in America. If you hit someone on the way to death row, if there's less of a punishment for that, but in Torah, there's the Torah. If you curse someone, whatever, if you hurt someone emotionally, so to say, on their way to death row, the Torah says it's not really prohibition, such as prohibition. It's not so strict because the person's not going to live through this experience. But either way, we very tackled it last week. But the end of the day is, according to our Mishnah, it seems to be that cursing is only by amcha. You only curse your parents if they behave like people of the community. But if they're not amcha, if they're not members of the community, then the prohibition of cursing or the punishment for cursing at least is not there. So the Gemara says, why don't we use that as we're hitting is more striking is more strict. Where striking may not be after death, but it doesn't make a difference to how your parents behave. So the Gemara says, I think we ended off last week, it was only by maces, right? The only time a kid is allowed to hit a parents or curse a parents is when the parents are instigators for avodah zarah. So the Gemara says, so let's learn when it comes to cursing, the pasuk says, so therefore we learn that cursing is only a person who behaves like a member of the community, or a person who doesn't behave like the member of the community. It's not, the prohibition is not there. We're hitting. By the way, this is, I just want to say something, that this is a lot what's, I don't want to get into politics, but a lot what's going on now in all the struggles that's going on. We see that no matter what, even if you don't agree with what's going on, whether you say this person's not behaving right, there's no excuse to be violent, right? The makkah is ba'amcha or not ba'amcha. Whether the person behaves the way you think they should be behaving, or they're not behaving the way they should be behaving, there's no excuse to hit someone. Cursing, whatever the Torah is going to get into, if amcha is part of it or not. But to hit someone, to get violent because you say this person's not behaving according to Torah, that's not allowed. Either way, that's a side note. So the Gemara says, Mashenka Makal Kasava, Mashenka in Makal, it's not Amcha, only if it's Amcha. But if they don't behave like Amcha, you're allowed to curse them. So Kasava, our Mishnah holds, that no, that we don't learn that when it comes to punishing of cursing parents. So we learn from hitting that just like hitting, striking someone is whether the person behaves or not. So to cursing someone, it doesn't make a difference if the person behaves or not. You're not allowed to curse them. Let's hold that everyone, these Mishnahs kind of go together, because we in the Tanur Rabbanan we learned the Kal V'chomer that says no, that cursing is less. That cursing is only ba'amcha, where hitting is not ba'amcha. Therefore, we would have thought that if hitting is both amcha, not amcha, so then cursing should be even more lenient. And nevertheless, we have an extra pasuk to teach us that even cursing after death. So then we have a machlekes now. Which one is it? So the Gemara answers, it means our Mishnah, the Mishnah that's in our Gemara, disagrees with the Tanur Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, let's say there's a machlekes tanai, the Tanya, what we learned. What is it talking about? So we learned chad a kuti. Now a kuti. I don't know how people translate it usually, but kuti were a type of people. That the kutim were the type of people that came. So Sanhedrin exiled 10 tribes, the first 10 tribes. So the land was empty. So with Sanhedrin, one of the things he did is he reorganized people. So he put in another ethnicity, he put in another type of people called kutim into the north of Eretz Yisrael, what we would know as the North Kingdom. So the story goes is that the story is told, it's a Navi, that the lions came and started to eat them, started to kill them. So Sanhedrin forced the Jews to teach the Kutim how they could live in the land. He says, what's this idea? You lived in the land, the lions didn't come. So why are the lions coming to Kutim? So basically the Jews said that because they serve idols and they don't live like Jews. So the Kutim kind of converted, but they converted out of only to be able to live in the land. Later in history, the Kutim, I think there's still people that are kind of, I think in Shechem, I think there's still people who practice their practice, but in the second temple they were a big thorn to the Jewish people. Famous thing, they came to try to help the building of the temple, and Ezra said Lo Lechem. So either way, Tanachad, we learned what happens at Kuti. So Kuti ata mitzava ala kosei v'ata mitzava kolosei. So the Torah says that about this Kuti. The one opinion says that you're not allowed to hit them, but there's no prohibition of cursing them. Tanya Yidich, and another brayso we learn that says, There's no prohibition of whether hitting them or cursing them. You have to remember that they caused a lot of trouble for the Jewish people. At the beginning, when the Jewish people came back with Ezra, they thought maybe they're going to partnership. And when Ezra said it's not for you to get involved in the building of the temple, the Imamish were very difficult. We have all the Gemaras that he went to cause trouble. They try to stop the building of the temple. Whatever, it was a thorn. Now there's still a little bit of them left, and they still do sacrifices, I think, on top of Hagrizim. All right, either way. So it says, so with the other opinion says that Akuti, there's no prohibition of hitting or cursing them. So what is the machlekes? The kuli amakutim geri emes. Everyone holds that their conversion, like I said, because Sanhedrin realized they couldn't live in the land, so they converted a conversion in order to be like Jews. So God should let them live in the land of Eretz Yisrael. So but they didn't behave like Jews. So what kind of how did we view their conversion? So we initially were thinking in the Gemara that everyone holds Gary Emerson. They did a proper conversion. My love, so what's the disagreement? The Marasavar Makshin Hakala Klala, Marasavar Makshin Hakala Klala. So the one who holds that you're allowed to hit them but not curse, you're not allowed to hit them, but you're allowed to curse them, means that because they didn't act like Amcha, means they converted. The conversion is a conversion, so basically technically they're Jews, but in their behavior they're not Amcha because of what they've done, how they were behaving. They were hurting the Jews, murdering the Jews. It says that until Nehemiah came down to protect the Jews while they were building Yerushalayim, it was impossible. So they didn't act like Amcha. So therefore, one opinion holds they're not like Amcha, therefore you're allowed to curse them, but you're not allowed to hit them. The other opinion says you're not allowed to curse them or hit them because even if they don't act like Amcha, that's the argument. So my love, how come the Marasavar Makshin Hekeliklala, Marasavar Le Makshin Hekeliklala? He says no. Like the Kulam Le Makshin Hekeliklala, everyone says we don't compare hitting to cursing. It means there's no such thing. There's no prohibition of cursing for someone who doesn't behave like Amcha. What's the argument? One holds that they're real converts. They're converts of lions. What's converts of lions? That they're only scared of the lions because the lions were eating them, so they converted out of fear of the lions, but they had no interest in becoming Jews. So the Gemara says, 1 second. But there's another law that says that their law of a shar is like Yisrael. We'll learn in Rashi what that means in a second. It means the prohibition that we have laws in Babakama, Babametzia, right? That a person Babakama, that a ox who gores. So there's a difference between a tam and a mu'id. That if the goring ox is doing it more than 3 times, it means that's the way it behaves. It's a mu'id l'davar. That's its behavior to be a goring. So obviously the owner has to be more watchful because his or her ox has a tendency to gore, and therefore if it does any damage, you have to pay full damages. However, because goring is not a regular behavior of an ox, and if it just does it out of the blue, like that's called a tam, so though you have a little bit of responsibility, but you have to pay only half. That's a machlekes over there if it's a knas, if it's a punishment, or if it's mumminus. A tam is a knas, means it's a fine. But if your animal actually has a tendency, it's not a fine. You're responsible because you did damage. Now the question is like this: if Gentiles ox scores, right, and then they're under the law of the Jewish people. This may not sound pleasant, but this is the rule. If a Gentile's ox scores in Eretz Yisrael under the law of Torah, no matter if it's a custom or not a custom, it has to always pay full price. By a Jewish ox, it's half price unless it has a tendency. By a Gentile ox, you have to pay full price no matter what. And on the flip side also, if you damage its ox, if it's a kuti, so you pay like whatever the laws is for a Jew to pay. But if it's a Gentile, you don't have to pay anything. Again, I'm not going to go into the reasoning of the laws, but that is the law. So the very fact that we say that its ox falls under the laws of a Jew means to say that they obviously converted properly and therefore they're Jews. However, they're not called lying converts. However, they're not amcha, and that's the argument. The argument is if a person behaves like amcha, so then you're not allowed to curse them. But if they don't behave like they should be behaving, and that applies to any Jew, and the kutim, just that's the way they were, and therefore the cursing is not a prohibition of hitting is, according to the opinion that says we don't compare cursing to hitting when it comes to that. I just want to learn the Rashi's. Rashi says, Geri emisem. There's a few Rashis before the next Mishnah that these kutim were Geri emes, they were true converts. Mitchilasim gerim gemurim hayu. So Rashi says initially when they converted, doesn't say. You have to remember that was Sanhedrin didn't do something unique in this case. That was what he did. Sanhedrin was a mixer. His opinion was, his theory in ruling in world dominance was that the way you dominate the world is to move people out of their comfort zone. Right now, what is the world shaking with? The world's shaking with national pride. Russia has national pride. This person has everyone has national pride. When you have national pride, it's very hard to deal with people that have national pride. Sanhedrin figured it's very simple. Take everyone out of move everyone. Take the Jews out of Israel and take the Babylonians out of Babel and take the Egyptians out of Egypt. So much so halachically, this comes into halacha. Halachically, the laws of the prohibitions of marrying people, the Torah gives us prohibitions. Certain people are not allowed to come into the Jewish people. If you're from Moab, if you're from Egypt, you have to wait. If you're from Edom, there's certain people that are not allowed to come in. Those prohibitions fall off today because Sanhedrin changed the fact. These are not the same the Egyptians. The Egyptians who live today in Egypt after Sanhedrin were people from another country that Sanhedrin moved into Egypt. And the reason is that he wanted to break national pride. So he told even Chizkiyahu, when the king Chizkiyahu, when he wanted to move the people from the kingdom of Yehuda, he says, I'll take you to another land, just as good as Israel. But it's not Israel. So yeah, of course, we know the story that of course Chizkiyahu didn't give in, and there was the great falling of Sanhedrin. But up until that point, he moved everyone. So here he moved the Kutim into Eretz Yisrael. They couldn't live there, so they converted. So it says in the beginning, they were proper converts. They became wicked. Just like any Jew who doesn't behave like Amcha, and therefore that became his classification. He was a Jew who wasn't acting like Amcha. And just like you are theoretically, you're allowed to you're pater on their cursing, you would think you're pater on their hitting. So the Gemara says that Geri Aroyase, that they weren't real converts. And therefore Rashi says, basically, this is a strong Rashi. Rashi learns that the Geri Aroyas means because they mamish didn't have any intention to become Jewish, they weren't kosher. They stay as Gentiles. So the reason why they're pater is because they're not Jewish. He says, what is the question? What did we learn about a shar? What does it mean, if our ox were to gore his ox, and his ox, that gores our ox, so therefore the laws are the same. If it's a ox that doesn't have the custom, it doesn't have the tendency to gore, he pays chatzi nezik, and if it's a mord, if it has the tendency, he pays nezik shalom. But if it was a real Gentile, if a Jewish ox scores a Gentile ox of an idol worshiper, you're not obligated to pay. And if an idol worshipper's, this is probably from the censor, the idol worshipper's ox, whether it's a ox that has the tendency to gore, not the tendency to gore, so Rashi seems to say one thing that doesn't make sense. I don't want to go too deep into it. He says that the Mishnah actually says, in the beginning, the Mishnah says that one rice says, Kuti atem tzav al-kasev, yatem tzav al-klasev. Tanidach, yatem tzav al-klasev, al-kasev. Okay. Yeah, so you're not, why? Because they weren't Geri Emes. They weren't true converts. So okay. So there. But the conclusion is shmamina that they are considered Geri Emes. They are considered real converts, and therefore the argument is if they mamish don't act like if they don't act like amcha, so then you have to So then according to one opinion, you compare the hitting to the cursing, and therefore they're both not considered obligated. And the other one says we don't compare hitting, you're not allowed to, and cursing, you are not chayiv. Okay, let's just go a little further. We'll just go a little bit in the Mishnah. Gemara says that now goes the laws of kidnapping. What is the laws of kidnapping? Hagoinev nefesh misrael, someone who kidnaps someone. Ein chayiv. So what is the halachic laws of kidnapping? Achi yachnisu dirshusai. You have to take him into your property. You kidnap them from their property, from wherever they are, into your property. And Rabbi Huda Omer, it's not enough to bring them into your property. You have to use them as some sort of use of them, where you're actually not just moving something, but you're also using them as a slave, so to say. And you use him, you take advantage of him. And you have to you sell him agoinev. So in machra, and you sell them. Okay, so therefore Rabbi Huda argues and says that it has to be, you have to use them, not just bring them into your property. Agoinev es benoi. What happens if someone kidnaps their own child? Right? Every once in a while, you're in America, you get an alert. Someone's running away with their kid. So agoinev es benoi. Rabbi Shmuel benoi shel Yechanan ben Brukach mechayev. There is a law of kidnapping your own children. That's not because, why is he potter? Because seemingly you're not, they're in your domain, their existence is in your domain, and now that you're keeping them in their domain. What happens if you kidnap a person? If you kidnap a slave, it's not considered kidnapping. But you're kidnapping a person that's half slave and half free. But how does a person become a half slave and half free? Obviously, if a slave is owned by two owners, and one of them owners free the slave, and the other owner retains his ownership. So you can't say just because I'm a slave and so therefore I'm a full slave to the next person. The other person also had ownership of me, and he released me. So the laws are, you work for yourself one day and you work for someone else one day. You put on your slave clothing on a Monday, and on Tuesday you're a free man. So the problem is that such a person who's a chatzi ev and chatzi ben chorim is complicated. Because is he Jewish? Is he not Jewish? Is he able to do the things that a Gentile slave is allowed to do? You have to remember, we're talking about a Gentile slave who kind of is a convert. We'll learn soon that a Gentile slave almost falls under the laws of a woman, because they go through a kind of a conversion. They do bris and they do things. So but now this person's not just any slave. He's only half slave. He's half free. So what happens if you kidnap such a person? So the person says, Rabbi Yehuda Machayev Chacham Paitim. Yehuda says Yechayev. Why? Because there's the freedom of the person, and the Chacham say Pater because it's not yet. We'll learn the Machlekes will be explained in the Gemara. Okay, we're just going to go up to the Teiku. Tanakama loy boy imur. The Gemara has asked a question. What is the argument in the beginning of the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda says it's not enough to kidnap a person and bring them to your property. You also have to use them, right? But the pasuk clearly says that Rabbi Yehuda is quoting a pasuk. The pasuk clearly says that visamar boy, that you use the person. So why are the Chacham saying that's not necessary? So Omar Racha Brei de Rava, Rabacha, the son of Rava, says, Imur b'pachas mishava pruta ikebenayu. They both agree that you use them. The question is, what happens if you use them? Again, we learned that in Torah, usage is only up to a value. You have to start with the value. The value is a pruta. What happens if you use someone less than a pruta? So if you use them less than a pruta, it's not real use. In that case, Rabbi Yehuda says that it's still not kidnapping. Where the rabbis say that's also considered kidnapping. It doesn't have to be a proper use, any kind of use. Where the Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be a use of value. Now, boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah is a famous person who asks all kind of interesting questions in the Talmud. Ganvoy, you steal someone, umachrei, and you sell them yashan while they're sleeping. Is that considered kidnapping? There's no awareness here, right? The mahu macher isha, you sell a woman ubra, not for herself. You're selling her fetus inside of her, the child inside of her. She's pregnant. Mahu. What's the question? The question is there any usage here? Right? There's no usage. You didn't do anything to the woman, and you didn't do anything to the child. The child is not, you didn't kidnap the woman. You only kidnapped the woman for the baby. and the person's sleeping. What could you have done to that? You can't use the person who's sleeping. Maybe say that there is no usage. Gemara says no. That you lean on the sleeping person, so you're catching your balance on. So even though the person's sleeping and the person didn't do anything for you, but his existence in your house helped you balance yourself. You leaned on them. Or this is an interesting question. Isha de ukma ba'api zeka. The woman is pregnant. So here the Gemara goes into, again, we're not going to get into how people personally view this, but the Gemara says that a woman's size, physical size, when she's pregnant, is nothing to do with her. It's the baby. It's not, the woman's not heavy. It's that she's pregnant. So, but the fact is that she's larger than she would usually be. So let's say you're in a storm, and you stand behind the woman to protect yourself from the storm, from the wind. Right, so the wind is now you're more protected because you have a larger space of protection because she's pregnant. So the fact is that her pregnancy is protecting you, even though you didn't kidnap her, you kidnapped her child, but the child, so to say, is protecting you. So from the wind. So isha de ukma ba'ape zika derech imor bekach or ein derech imor bekach. That's the question. Is that really called a use or not? The Gemara says, as usually the Gemara concludes with the questions that Rabbi Yirmiyah answers, the Gemara says, Teku. I want to say something. I think the story goes that Rabbi Yirmiyah was thrown out of the Beis Medrash at one point. He asked so many of these complicated questions that, there's a point, even the rabbis say enough questions, and they banned him from the Beis Medrash. But in Hasidic and Kabbalistic and Zohar teaching, Rabbi Yirmiyah is very, very, very holy, and his questions are very deep, much deeper than what's touching the surface, because he asks all kind of questions. He always asks the most abstract. He's like one of those children in class who, lahavdil, that will ask the most, far out option that something could go wrong. But there's an idea.
Can't relate at all.
Sorry?
I said I can't relate at all.
To which part of the question?
Being kicked out of yeshivas for asking too many questions.
You can't relate that, yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stop here, and we'll finish. We'll continue the Gemara next. The Gemara goes into the next piece. The Gemara is going to go into what are the laws of kidnapping. We're going to get into the laws of kidnapping and the usages of kidnapping and all that. All right, Laila Tov and Shavua Tov. Take care. Avi, good to have you back. Shavua Tov, take care.